Do any other tall girls understand that feeling when you walk into a room and it feels like all eyes are on you? It's kind of like you get a little bit clammy and you just want to run away and hide. Or what about that feeling when you see yourself in a group photo and realize how much you stick out in comparison to others? Okay, there are a lot of feelings going on right now. But I'm giving extra hugs to the tall girlies who have experienced all of these feelings. All these experiences have one thing in common, and they involve being seen, being noticed, or even being judged. And in today's episode, we're talking about how some tall women don't like or even fear being perceived, and how that's detrimental to our confidence and mental health. So let's get into it. Good morning, everybody. You are currently listening to a Tall Girls podcast hosted by a tall girl named India. I hope everyone who's tuning in today is doing super fantastic. Before I get into this episode, I do want to say, make sure you follow me on my socials at a Tall Girls podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and Pinterest so that you can stay up to date on all of the latest podcast episodes and catch a glimpse of my everyday life. Also, feel free to leave me a review and let me know how tall you are. I'm genuinely curious. I also have a monthly newsletter. Make sure you subscribe to that. Everything is going to be linked in the description. You know, this whole topic of being scared or this fear or whatever that some tall women have, this really would have been a good topic for Halloween. This would have been a good topic for Halloween weekend, and I could have done this last week. But whatever, it is what it is. Honestly, people arguing with you and people lying to you is also pretty scary too. So honestly, the last episode was also pretty fitting for Halloween weekend. Make sure you go check out that episode after tuning into this one. Also, I hope you guys voted this week. I know at least in New York, election day was this past week. There was a mayoral election, and I think like 2 or 3 other states had elections around this time. I don't know for sure. I just hope that you guys are keeping up to date with the important political stuff that's going on right now. Anyways, back to this episode. This was inspired by a TikTok video that I saw a very long time ago, probably like a year or two maybe ago, and I cannot find this TikTok video. It's so annoying. Like, I find good TikTok videos and then I can't find it because I forget to save it, or it's from a long time ago. Maybe they deleted it, I don't know. But anyways, it was basically this tall woman sitting in her car, and she was doing like a bit of a story time, and she was talking about how she is, I think, like 6'2" or 6'3", and she was in a grocery store, and several people in that one instance of her going grocery shopping, several people came up to her to tell her about her height, tell her that she's tall, or just comment on her height, comment on her body, and so forth. And she was just talking about how being perceived as a tall woman is exhausting, because people like coming up to her to comment on her height and her body. That happens pretty frequently. It happens often enough, and sometimes even several times a day, or several times in one outing, like her going to the grocery store, and it's just tiring. And honestly, I get it. I've been in similar situations, but before we get into that, let's talk about what it means to be perceived. Because when hearing it, you're probably like, what? Like, what is that? So to be perceived by someone means that another person is aware of your presence and is forming impressions and judgments about you based on your appearance, behavior, and the context of the situation. So what does that look like for tall women? What does that mean in relation to tall women? It can mean the constant stares when you enter a room, a lot of questions about your height, comments about height-related features like maybe your arms or your legs, whispering about you, whispering about your height, literally in close proximity to you so that you can hear, etc. Let's listen to a couple examples of this so it makes a little bit more sense.
One thing about being tall is that you gotta like attention a little bit to be tall, because no matter where you go, anytime you walk into a room, all eyes are gonna be right on you because you're the tallest one in the room. So if you don't like attention, I'm sure being tall kind of sucks. Luckily for me, I like attention a little bit, so I guess it works in my favor. But sometimes I do go places and I'm like, I just want to walk in and blend in with everyone else, but I literally can't because my head is above everyone else's and I just cannot blend in. So yeah, tall people problems.
I understand at 6'4" that people are going to stare, but the way this man just stared at me at the gas station just made me feel weird. Like, I'm 44 years old. I've dealt with this my whole life. I think I was 6 feet in my freshman year, early my freshman year. So I totally get it. And I also understand that while I'm not like Shaq, like in girl world, I am probably like a LeBron James. So if you see me in real life, you're probably like, oh my gosh, that woman is really tall. Like, not just like she's 5'9", she's 5'10" tall. Like, I'm 6'4". I get it. But the way this man just stared at me just made me feel so weird. Like, he could not stop looking at me. I just don't know how to react to people like that. I just felt icky, and then I'm like, what? Like, how do I respond to people like that?
I think a tall woman's struggle that is not talked about very much is when you're tall and you go places to like the gas station or the store, like people stare at you and like, okay, like, yeah, especially like if you're like a tall woman, like people stare. And then when people look at you, you feel the need to like acknowledge them because like they're looking right in your eyes. And then, you know, you feel like, okay, well, I should nod at this person or smile at this person because they're acknowledging me, so I should acknowledge them back. But then when you do that, it kind of like serves as an invitation for like people to come up and talk to you. And like, I don't want to talk all the time, you know, like I'm not here to talk. And so then you're either like, okay, well, I look at them and acknowledge them and smile back at them, or I don't look at them. And I feel like when you don't look at them, like when you don't acknowledge people acknowledging you, then they just assume like, oh, well, she's just stuck up and she's like a B word, you know? And so I feel like that's just like a hard, like you can't win for losing, you know?
Even the folks on Reddit talk about this. Under a thread, a tall girlie said, I'm 5'11" and I get stared at a lot. Every time I go out of my house, I get stared at. I'm a very shy person, so it's quite annoying, but I just ignore it. In a separate thread, another tall girlie said, I'm 6'3" and people stare all the time. I've actually had average height people I was with point out how many people were staring at us as we were walking in the shops because they were not used to it. Experiences like these are fairly common for us tall girlies, even me standing at a little over 5'10". And before you come for me like, oh, 5'10" isn't that tall, to all the people who say 5'9", 5'10" isn't that tall, it's still tall. In fact, it's several inches above the average height of a woman. We don't play about the short tall girlies over here. We also experience a lot of the tall girl problems that the 6 foot and up girlies face, like the clothing struggles and the stares and the comments and questions and so forth. So let's not downplay or minimize our experiences just because we're not 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". Like, we still have our struggles over here. Anyways, being perceived as a tall woman basically means being seen constantly, being noticed constantly, and even being judged. And many tall women don't like this and actually fear being perceived, being seen, being very noticeable, and even being judged. And this fear can negatively impact their mental health and their confidence. So let's talk about that. So this awareness of constantly being perceived, this can kind of be connected to the idea or the feeling of taking up too much space, being the odd one out in group photos, the stares, the comments. It can honestly make you feel like Goliath. Let's just keep it real. And because of this, we feel as though we have to shrink ourselves to hide or act differently so that other people don't really notice us or don't judge us. So this can look like slouching, avoiding heels, not wanting to stand next to people, not wanting to really stand up around people, even talking in a quieter voice or even holding back your opinions, etc. Let's listen to this video really quickly.
Being tall as a girl is such a struggle. I've always felt like the oddball and different, and it stops me from being myself all of the time. I 100% can understand where you're coming from. Being 43 years old and being 6'4" for, I was 18, I think, when I finally reached 6'4". So it's like almost 3 decades of being just over 6 feet tall and just being so different. And I grew up in a family. My stepdad is 5'8", my mom is 5'6", and they had a daughter together that is 5'3". So me being over 6 feet tall for pretty much all through high school, I was just so much different than my family. I always felt like the oddball. I always felt different. My clothes never fit correctly. So it was always something just pointing that Jordan's different. Like, Jordan doesn't look like everybody else. Like, she doesn't even match her family. Like, people in my small town thought I was adopted. Traditionally, women are, supposed to be small and petite and dainty and not take up so much space. And so I remember as a young woman just constantly trying to shrink myself, slouching, finding ways to bend one knee, like to bend the hip or drop the hip to try to look a little bit shorter next to cute guys that I liked. And it's a struggle, and it's not something that you're going through alone.
And when we think our height is an issue, we try to shrink ourselves, not just physically, but also mentally, emotionally, even professionally, so that people don't see us as too much, so that people hopefully don't notice us, so that people hopefully don't judge us. Now, I came across this very interesting term called tall poppy syndrome, where people who stand out are subjected to criticism, resentment, or even rejection by peers. The term is derived from the tendency of some poppy flowers to grow taller than others, making them easy to notice and potentially vulnerable to being cut down. And credits to Amber Wardell. The article is going to be linked below. This article and the term tall poppy syndrome is honestly about women overall, so like high achievers, more assertive women, even women leaders and so forth, not necessarily directed to tall women, but this in a way can be connected to tall women because for the most part, we do stand out. And because of that, we are subject to the questions, the stares, the comments, even sometimes the aggressive behaviors. And this can lead to us honestly, even like sometimes holding back our personalities, especially if you're a more outgoing, loud, not necessarily in a bad way loud, but outgoing, very bubbly, upbeat personality. Sometimes you feel the need to hold it back because of your height. So that can lead to, holding back our personalities, holding back our true selves, and even can lead to resentment towards our height because our height is giving us all this attention, especially negative attention that we don't want. And I feel like I can't truly act like myself because of my height. So it could also lead to resentment towards being tall. Additionally, in my research, I stumbled across an article that made me think about the tall neurodivergent baddies. If you didn't know, neurodivergent means differing in mental or neurological function from what is considered typical or normal. So this includes those who have ADHD, dyslexia, etc. Now for the article I found, in summary, it discusses how the fear of being perceived is common among neurodivergent individuals who often feel hyper aware of how others view them due to societal pressures to conform to neurotypical norms. And this self-monitoring often leads to masking, emotional exhaustion, and anxiety because they think that being themselves will ultimately lead to rejection or judgment. So what exactly does that mean for the tall neurodivergent baddies? And if you're tall and neurodivergent, you can let me know your thoughts on this because I don't fully understand the subject. I mean, I listen, I could even do a full episode on this to go more in depth about it, about how being tall and neurodivergent ultimately can affect our confidence and mental health. Maybe this is a topic that can be an episode of its own. We'll see. But right now, I personally think, and you can let me know if you agree or disagree, that this hyper awareness of being noticed or of how people view them is like exemplified. It's like tripled, it's amplified. I think amplified is the correct word, but it's like not just hyper aware, it's hyper aware because you're already different from the rest because you're neurodivergent. Now add being tall on top of it. Now you're different from the rest. You extra stand out. That can maybe be a little bit nerve-wracking. I actually came across this Reddit post that was titled, "I struggle being seen as scary as a tall autistic woman." And she basically talked about how being tall and her build and her demeanor and her autism made her feel hyper visible and isolated. Very interesting stuff here. Let me know your thoughts on this and let me know if you think an episode on being tall and neurodivergent would be something of interest to you. But even having anxiety or even social anxiety, but even just general anxiety, generalized anxiety, I think that's what it is. But even having anxiety while being tall can have an effect. Let's listen to this tall girlie's take.
So when I was young, I suffered really bad with really bad anxiety. I didn't like going in public at all. I didn't like the attention I got. Really bothered me. Since I've gotten older, I'm way more secure. I love my life. I'm good. Things are good over here, okay? However, every once in a while, I do still get anxiety. More often than not when I'm hungover. Anxiety is real, okay? And it sucks. It just sucks. The last thing I want to do when I have anxiety is be noticed or talk to people. And there is no hiding when you are 6'4". I can't be invisible if I tried. And I do try when I'm anxious. I do not want to be seen, and it doesn't work very well. So that is hands down the worst part to me. When you're really tall, you're on like a permanent stage where people are constantly looking at you. You're way higher than everyone, so we get noticed really easily. And sometimes you just don't want to be noticed. You just want to exist and not have anyone acknowledge or look your direction at all. Most of the time, being tall is seriously amazing. So I'm not trying to complain over here, but I want people to understand that there is some really sides of it that I can't change and I can't do anything about.
Now, it's also important to note that not all tall women feel this way. There are tall women who do fear being perceived, who don't like being perceived, who don't like being noticeable and so forth. But there are also other tall women who feel the exact opposite. Some tall women don't really mind. Some don't care. Some may even enjoy it. Let's listen to this tall girlie's take.
I know tall women don't like being stared at or whispered at in public. But sometimes, like for me, because I am 6'4", I take into consideration it's not me walking around here. Like, it's not a lot of tall women at my height that are just randomly walking around. So probably if you do come across me, it is like, oh my God, and I'm fine on top of that, it's double shocking. You know what I'm saying? So I try not to be rude to people when they ask me about my height because I am rare.
There's even a comment under this video that another tall girlie gave saying, I love the attention they give to me. And it's like, period. We all have different upbringings. We all have different backgrounds. Every tall woman is different from the next tall woman. So obviously our experiences are going to shape how we see things, how we view things, how that's practically the same thing that I just said, but how we see things, how we react to things, and how we think and so forth. So I just want to make sure that the tall girlies who do feel as though, being perceived as a scary thing and they just don't like it and they are afraid of it, I just want to make sure that they know that they're not alone. And to get to the point that some tall women are at, some confident tall women, because I understand how it's like when you see other people who are confident in something that you're insecure about, you're like, how did they get there? How are they like this? Why? Like, why am I not at that point? Why do I not feel the same way as them? I just want to say that you got to take baby steps to get to the point where you want to be at. And, some people's journey to confidence is much longer than others. And that's okay. And it's like a mindset shift, yes, is extremely important. A mindset shift is ultimately a great way to get there. But as I said before, it's just baby steps for sure. Just like, for example, this one's for the tall girlies. If you feel like people are constantly staring at you, it's not necessarily because you're tall, or it could be, but it's also because you're hot stuff. People think you're absolutely stunning and they just can't stop staring. Period. And I also think it has a lot to do with other people, because some people just don't know how to keep inside thoughts as inside thoughts. They don't understand that, when you gawk at people or when you're staring, like that person knows that you're staring at them and it's a bit creepy. And I don't think some people really just understand that you could potentially react negatively when they say the most ridiculous things to your face. And to those people, I just want to say, if you see a tall girl in public, you do not need to go up to her and tell her she's tall, or ask how tall she is, or if she plays any sports, or make any weird comments about her body, or try to pick her up. Trust me, anything you've said, we've already heard times 20. And it needs to stop. Overall, it's important to remember that being tall isn't a problem that needs to be fixed. It isn't something to hide or minimize, or anything that needs to be changed. Being tall is a blessing that deserves to be celebrated and embraced. Anyways, I'm going to end the episode here. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate you. Of course, as always, feel free to hit me up on my socials at A Tall Girls Podcast, and let me know what you think about this episode. Do you not like being perceived? Do you fear being perceived? Do you not like being seen, being noticeable, being judged? Do you feel like running away every time it feels like all eyes are on you? If so, or even if you don't mind the attention, how do you deal with it? How do you deal with constantly being noticeable? How do you deal with the stares? How do you deal with the comments? Let me know. And if you have any stories, of course, feel free to share. This is a safe space for all tall women to just vent and just talk about their experiences as a tall woman. And I would definitely love to hear it. And I'm going to respond to the DMs and the comments in a timely fashion. I'm in grad school, y'all, so y'all gotta give me a little bit of grace. Also, by the time this episode is up, there's going to be like a tall tour in like 2 days on a Saturday on November 8th. So if you're in New York City and you're a tall girly, I'm going to be there. And maybe we can meet up. Maybe we can link up and have a chat. We'll see. I have some super exciting stuff that I'm going to be giving out there. And yeah, I just can't wait to see how it turns out. And if you're going to be there, I also can't wait to meet you. Also, let me know if you want me to do an episode on being tall and neurodivergent. I think that will be something interesting to explore. And until then, I will catch you guys in the next one. Good night and goodbye.